Welcome to Support Life, a program focusing on current social issues from a life-affirming perspective. I'm Gavin Baulch, and my guest is Kathy Clubb, the creator of the web blog Light Up the Darkness. Well, welcome today.
Thank you, Gavin. Thanks for having me.
I love the name, Light Up the Darkness.
It was inspired by a line from a movie, actually, that I can't remember.
Well, that's all right. There'll be lots of folk who will remember, who are watching. Isn't it interesting how movies and the visual impact us?
Yeah, it is. And the most unlikely movies can inspire us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I like that because when you think about it, if there's a lot of darkness, you only need a little light.
Absolutely. That's a quote that's on the header of my website.
Oh, is it?
A quote from Francis of Assisi.
Yes.
All the darkness in the world cannot extinguish the light of a single candle.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And that's how I think we're called to be.
And if we're content to be a little light, right, and not a big lighthouse or something, then actually the flame won't go out.
That's right. You're not in danger if you try to stay small,
Mm-hmm.
but it still lights up the darkness.
Okay, so let's take your little light, you.
Yeah.
Where did things begin for you?
How far back do you want to go?
Well, does Tasmania come into it?
Yeah, I lived in Tasmania for 20 years,
Mm-hmm.
had most of my children down there. So I moved down there, we had 4, and then we went on to have 9 more children after that.
Mm-hmm.
I homeschooled in Tasmania, and towards the end of my time there I started to get involved in pro-life work.
Okay. Now, one doesn't just get started in something. There's a catalyst. There's something that happens. Did something get your attention?
It was more that I was thrust into it. I guess it was in the back of my mind, going back to when I was much younger, and at the age of 20 I found myself expecting a baby, and I wasn't married, and so of course the option was there to abort.
Mm-hmm.
But I couldn't do that. I knew what abortion meant. It means killing, and I couldn't do that for the sake of convenience, so I had my first child out of wedlock. So that simmered away in the background, a respect for life, until I started to see that it's not enough just to believe in being pro-life. There's always something that you can do that's more than just sitting at home and thinking that you're pro-life. So I started working on a website for someone else, and that's really what got me started, a pro-life website.
Okay, so that's where your skills were honed. You were doing a website for somebody else?
Yeah, I was just upgrading an existing website and trying to get some more traffic there, and it got me thinking about what a great tool the internet is. Mm-hmm. And as I started to connect with people online and join Facebook groups and learn about social media, I realised that the internet is the place where people who need to hear the pro-life message are going. So it has a dual function. It's an educational tool for people who are doing pro-life work, but it's also where you need to be with the answers when people have questions.
Yes. Wow, well that's an interesting insight. And now you have how many children all up?
13.
13 children.
Yeah.
That's a good number.
Yeah, it is a good number. Baker's dozen.
Baker's dozen.
Yeah.
Keeps you busy.
Yes, absolutely.
Keeps you young.
Apparently.
Well, with homeschooling,
yeah.
You become educated too, right?
I know my phonics very well. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So those formative years, you're 20, you have a child, there's a learning curve in itself.
Yeah, that's true.
And did you discover internally what you really, really believed and not just thought you believed?
Well, I did. My whole life changed. I went from a very sinful life, a life that was about as far from a Christian life as you could imagine, with drugs and binge drinking and really unhealthy relationships. And I realized that inside I had a real instinct for motherhood, and I realised that I had a lot of ideas about motherhood that I'd never thought about. So I left my job and I focused on my baby, and I was really sure that mothering, the best way to be a mother is to be at home. So that's what I decided to do with my life anyway, to stay home with my children. So that's what I did.
Wow, that's clear and succinct, and it's not the most popular thing to be a stay-at-home mother, is it?
Well, it's not, but when people say things like that to me, or also bring up the number of children and say that's quite rare, to me it's really normal, because the mothers that I interacted with were stay-at-home mums who homeschooled their large families. And the mothers that I read about were the same kind of mothers. And it's only now that my circumstances have changed and I have some kids in school that I've realised there's a whole other world out there that I didn't really take much notice of for 20 years. So what seems unusual to me is very normal.
And you're now picking up what was unusual, and you're studying.
I'm studying, yeah, that's right. And I'm really enjoying it too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's nice to leave the phonics and to move on to something else.
Okay, so adult conversations.
Yeah.
All right, so tell me about some of those adult conversations. How's it going? What's the course?
It's a theology course, and so far I've done a philosophy unit, which was really interesting, history of the philosophy of the human person. So we went back to Aristotle and worked our way through to the postmodernists, and that's been really lovely. And a lot of the others in my class are from other cultures, other backgrounds, so it's really interesting to hear their insights too, because they've come from non-Western backgrounds. So they pick up nuances that we don't always pick up. I really appreciate that.
Wow. Well, we'll come back to Aristotle and Company in a moment. You're watching Support Life. We'll be back after the break. Welcome back to Support Life. I'm Gavin Baulch, and my guest is Kathy Clubb, the creator of the web blog Light Up the Darkness. Well, Kathy, here we go again. And we were talking about Aristotle, but we remembered something about the movie where that line came out of, which was...
I am legend.
I am legend, that's right. And the quote is...
Light up the darkness.
Light up the darkness. So here you are. You've had some life experiences. What about media?
Well, I worked at Channel 7 in Queensland for a few years after I left school, and I was in the telecine department, which I'm sure doesn't exist anymore, because I'd say everything's digital now. Yeah. So that was interesting. I did a lot of night shifts, which got me used to being a mum, and I got to see a lot of the behind-the-scenes workings of the TV station.
So what did you learn from that?
Well, there's a lot more that goes into media than you see in the finished product. And a lot of people work really hard, and they're not the people that necessarily get the credit for it. Yeah, and it's a really nice camaraderie when people are working together on a project too. So that's what I learned.
Yes, small communities, when they work well, get a finished product, an end result, don't they?
Yeah, that's true. And it's interesting to see people working really hard on one particular part of a project. Yeah, I really appreciate that, when people can use their gift and really focus on that one thing.
All right,
Yeah.
let's talk about the gift and focusing on one thing. Where have you found yourself because of the blog?
I interact online a lot with people because of the blog. I've met a few nice people in the flesh, but mostly it's been online. So even my interviews are mostly done through email. I've gotten to make friends with some post-abortive women, which has been a really great experience, because I think I used to depersonalize this thing called abortion and not really think about what it was like to go through it and what decisions might have led someone to choose abortion. And I definitely judged people too harshly because it was easy for me because I didn't make that choice. But now that I've gotten to know some of these women, I can see the impact that it's had on their lives, and that really there's a place in people's hearts that never ever heals, no matter how much faith they have, how much they know God loves them. There's this loss that's until they go to heaven, I think, and are reunited with their child, will always be there.
Now that's an interesting thought. I know it's a thought I've often shared with couples who have had a say, because sometimes the man has a very strong say or he says nothing, and reminding them that in heaven the child is put back together and is waiting to greet them. Now some people watching might find that an odd thought, but I would stake my whole life on that fact.
Yeah, I agree, Gavin. I think we can't go through life without hope that there is healing at the end of our lives and wholeness at the end of our lives, as well as what's offered to us through our lives as well.
Yes. Now, media, social media, we've discovered is powerful.
Yeah.
I think some of your children might be aware of that.
Yeah, definitely. My teenagers are starting to get interested in the medium of film, or video, I should say. So that's something that I'm hoping to encourage. My older ones were more interested in social media way before I was, but I have to admit that I do more on there now than they do. They don't all even have Twitter or Instagram accounts, so I can't always keep up with what they're doing. My eldest son is in the US, and he was pretty excited because his organisation was one of the ones to break the news a couple of weeks ago about the Planned Parenthood scandal. So social media was a really big part of that whole story being broken. So that again shows the power of social media and what one hashtag can do.
Okay, so it's coming back to that thought of a movie called The Power of One.
Oh, right. I never saw that.
But again, it emphasises just that we can make a difference.
Absolutely.
One person at a time.
Yeah. And that's how we engage with people too, online and in real life. We can have a message that's going out to many people, but really, when it comes down to it, we need to be making one-on-one dialogue with people online and treat the other person as if they're in the room with us too.
Yes. All right. Now, what's some of the face-to-face interaction you do and where?
With pro-life.
Yes.
Well, I pray outside an abortion facility every week. That's something that a lot of people have trouble with, and I did too in the past. I thought it was a bit too confrontational to be there. But now I think it's a very important witness, especially for Christians, for a few reasons. I think the prayer side of it is essential if we want to stop abortion. It's a stronghold of evil, and we need to be there on the site to be praying against that evil. We need to be praying for the people who are involved in the abortions and providing the abortions. And then, of course, we need to be praying for the mothers, whether or not they go through with the decision to have one. And then we need to be there to offer practical help too for women that decide to keep their babies. So we need to just give them a hand to go ahead with the pregnancy and whatever help they need with that.
Yes, it's not that you're again against the choice that the woman makes. It's there for her and informing her of what is available and what's occurring to her.
Absolutely. There are many women whose minds won't be changed at the door to the abortions facility, but that's okay. We can still pray for them. And we're never there as a hostile kind of a presence. There's no ganging up and there's no judging. It's really there to help anyone who does want that help And some women are just waiting for that help, even at the last moment.
On that thought, looking and waiting for help, you're watching Support Life, and we'll be back after the break. Welcome back to Support Life. I'm Gavin Baulch, and with me now is Kathy Clubb, the creator of the web blog Light Up the Darkness. Kathy, we've mentioned a whole lot of people and movies and thoughts and throwaway lines. What about the thought persona Christi? How does that play a role?
It's very important in pro-life work, anywhere that you're dealing with morality, because you want to be able to make a distinction between the wrong that someone may be doing and the person themselves. So we have to act in the person of Christ. We have to love the person, appreciate their dignity, acknowledge they're made in the image of God, but then find a way to communicate to them that they're doing something very wrong in their life and something that's hurting them. And it may be something that they're very passionate about, which is what you come across in the case of abortion. So it's very difficult to dialogue about abortion for that reason, but we can't stop saying that it's wrong because it's killing. It's a terrible injustice being done to the whole of society, and of course especially to the babies.
So the approach then is this holistic embracing of the mother and the child and a respect for life, sanctity of life. Do you want to just comment about that for a moment, the sanctity of life?
Well, for me that means that there's no life that's not important. And some people use as an excuse for abortion the fact that a child may be growing up unwanted, may be born into a household where there's going to be abuse. In fact, a policeman said that to me outside the abortion facility a couple of weeks ago. He was really emotional, and I felt really sorry for him because of what he'd seen in the course of his work, which is terrible situations that little children were in, and being abused in their own homes. But for me, as terrible as that is, it's not as bad as taking the life of the child and never giving that child hope that they can be happy sometime or be around people that love them at some point in their lives. Another example is the high number of abortions due to disability, and particularly Down syndrome children are being aborted at a very high rate these days. In some parts of the world, 80 to 90% of Down syndrome babies are aborted in the womb. So that's a terrible loss to society because they're such beautiful people. They're such joyful and peaceful people. And they're made in the image of God. They have the same dignity as we do. They're just different from us, and there's no excuse to abort them.
So we play around with words like tolerance. So where we will tolerate and put up with the messiness of an animal and saving it, but we can't tolerate that which is a little imperfect from our perspective. It's not convenient.
Convenient, yeah. A lot of the time it's down to convenience. And unfortunately, abortion, the decision to abort is made under such a time constraint. There's such an urgency to the decision, and I think if a lot of women were given a quiet space and time to reflect, I don't think they would go ahead with that decision. But society puts this pressure to make this snap decision because of the inconvenience in many cases. And it's a decision that most women come to regret.
Having watched a number of pro-life commercials made in the United States, which I was involved with in an indirect manner, I noticed that research simply says that a woman's natural first thought is to keep and protect the child.
I've read that many times by women who later go on to regret their abortions. Yeah, a lot of them seem to say that they came to the decision that they would like to keep their baby, they'd go ahead with it, but then other factors start to come into play, and it's very often outside pressure that's brought to bear on them.
So if there's any, let's use the word outside pressure, that they may perceive because you're near an abortion clinic and praying, and your intent is to offer them information but also the support in keeping that child.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of support out there. There's support there's medical help. There are pro-life doctors who can help if there's an unexpected diagnosis for the baby, or if the mother is having health problems too and a doctor has advised abortion. There are pro-life doctors who can usually find a way around that problem. There are people that offer practical help, such as help with transport and baby clothes, nappies, cots, and all that kind of thing that babies need. And there are people who'll just be a friend to a woman who needs a friend and a bit of moral support. And there are parenting classes, and there's help with study if a mother wants to continue her studies. There's heaps of help, but unfortunately women don't always know about that help. And abortion seems to be a default position for many people. That's unfortunate.
Yes. So as you're praying for the women, and sometimes with their partners and spouse as they approach the clinic, is it empathy or compassion that's released from you?
It's compassion, and I would say it's compassion with my friends as well. We may not have walked that exact path, but there's no one who's gone through life without some kind of grief and some kind of suffering, and that's a point of contact that we make with people that we see outside the facility. So, it might be construed by some people as a confrontation, but that's certainly not what's going on in our minds and in our hearts.
Well, there's a lot there to consider and to think about and to focus on. But I think that the presence and image of Christ that we seek to be in those circumstances, if only that could be conveyed and talked about by media, rather than the negative that we're against them. No, we're not. We're really for the mother and for her child. So there's no discrimination there.
That's right.
Well, thank you, Kathy, for your time.
Thank you, Gavin.
You've been watching Support Life, and that's all for our program today. Join us again next week. Goodbye.